you a few general items of reference regarding employee professionalism, and we'll cover topics in a number of different scenarios. And Attorney Thomas, I would imagine there are some new teachers, new support staff who are not familiar with the Tennessee Code of Ethics. So my first question would be, when was it established? And then as an attorney in your work, how frequently have you seen it referenced in court cases?
Greg, the Code of Ethics, ethics for teachers have been around for a long time, but it was actually turned into a statute and codified in 2010. And so that's what we're actually going to look at is the Tennessee Code annotated, what it says about the teacher code of ethics. And we see it a lot because it comes up in a lot of disciplinary matters. You got some teacher disciplinary matters. You also have some license issues that it comes up in. So, and it comes up in lawsuits. So it comes up in a lot of different ways, and you'll see, and we're going to use some case studies to sort of get to some of the real interesting nuggets about teacher code of ethics.
So just to remind you guys where we're going today, Dale's going to cover policy as it concerns a teacher code. He's going to cover the code of ethics, and then we're going to look at some case studies. But for if we put this in a nugget, just to let people know, if you condensed it, Dale, a lot of this just falls under the umbrella of good communication and the right relationships, employee to employee, but then also employee to student.
And to parents. You're right. A lot of it deals with communication, and you'll see in some of the cases that we talk about, some of the case studies, if you really drill down, communication was probably the primary issue. And you're right, it's communication with one another, between colleagues, with students, and with parents.
Okay, Dale, if we will, let's go ahead and go to your PowerPoint here. And right. I appreciate that it's been condensed. You're hitting the high notes for us.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'll tell you, a lot of this is common sense. And I'm going to go through the policy and also the code of ethics. But I really want to get to the fun part, which is the case studies, because I think that's where someone will see the code of ethics come to life in real life examples. So let's first go to the policy 5.600, staff rights and responsibilities. And so everyone will know what generally, if you look at our school board policies, most of these really follow along with the recommendations of the Tennessee School Board Association. So a lot of these policies, while these are specific to Jackson-Madison County, apply to a lot of school districts across the state. So let's first look at this policy, and you'll see each staff member has certain responsibilities. And I'm not going to read all of these, but one of them is that one of your primary responsibilities is to become familiar with the laws of the state and the policies of the board. So that's what I'm hoping to do, is make some of us familiar with some of these policies. And you'll notice it says each staff member. It doesn't say each teacher. It says each staff member. So this applies to everyone across the district. You'll also see that each staff member has the responsibility to adhere to the teacher code of ethics to the extent applicable. Now, obviously, some of the code of ethics only is going to apply to teachers,
right?
But a lot of it's going to apply to everybody in the district. So even though it's named the teacher code of ethics, you could almost say it's the staff code of ethics. So we also have a responsibility to use good judgment. So, that's a common sense type. You just got to use good judgment. And when we get to the case studies, you'll be surprised at how many people have not used good judgment. And so good judgment's very important. Then let's go on. I think this is important. We have a responsibility as staff members to be courteous and helpful to parents, visitors, and members of the public. And that gets to that communication piece that we alluded to earlier. Is we have that responsibility to be courteous and helpful. And you'll see a lot of the case studies we look at, the staff members weren't very courteous.
Dale, you're quoting policy, but a lot of this, I'm hearing our core values in this.
You're right.
Judgment, motivation, courage, service, support. I'm hearing core values.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You also have responsibility to keep records that are required by state law. And then the last one is to wear appropriate clothing, which is common sense. All right, then let's look at policy 5.611. This is actually the board policy on ethics. And again, this applies to all employees, and you'll see some key words there: integrity, high ideals, and human understanding. And it applies to all the employees. Number one is the maintenance of just and courteous professional relationships with staff, parents, students, and others. Again, that whole concept of relationships and communication. Number two, being efficient and knowledge in your field of work. Also, number three is to transact your business properly within the district. Four, again, establishment of friendly and intelligent cooperation between the community and the district. And some of our examples we're going to look at, there was not friendly and intelligent communication with the community. And that can present a problem to our employees. Representation of the school district. And basically keep in mind as an employee, even when you're not on school business, you're representing the district. And you know, a lot of times you're looking at students that may see you outside of the classroom, and you're still representing the district in doing that, because, you know, there's a special relationship with teachers and students. And so this is that, keep in mind, you're representing the district in all that you do, even if it's not on the school property.
I noticed in the Tennessee Code of Ethics, a lot of the language specifically talked about, even after school, those events where the teachers were in the presence of the student, particularly in those situations.
And we'll talk about this a little bit, especially in the days of social media. We're always in the presence of our students. You just think about it, and we'll look at some real problems with social media when we get to some of the case studies. The welfare of children. Keep in mind, the welfare of children is the first concern of the school district. So the welfare of children is very important. Restraint from using school contacts to promote partisan politics. And sometimes the promotion of certain political views can get our staff in trouble.
Is the key word there restraint?
That's right. Showing some restraint.
Okay.
I mean, number 8 under the ethics is the responsibility to make criticism of other staff members directly to the school administrator who has the responsibility of improving the situation. You know, and what this means is it really doesn't do any good, and we'll talk about social media again. It doesn't do any good to go on social media and blast administration.
But Dale, it feels good.
I know it makes us all feel good when we make these posts.
Right.
But we have the responsibility to take that to the people within the district, okay, and see if we can improve it from within before we get out there and just blast the district. And we'll see some case studies where that has caused some problems for some teachers.
So this involves contacting your immediate supervisor.
That's right.
If you're as a citizen, contacting your board director.
You'll see it ultimately go to the administrator that has responsibility, and ultimately to the director of schools if necessary. It's a chain of command type process. And again, these are in our ethics policies. That is most school districts across the state has adopted. Then we'll look proper use and protection of all school properties, equipment, and materials. And you'll see in some of our case examples where that can also get us in trouble. So now let's actually look at the Tennessee Code of Ethics. And this is what the General Assembly has put in place as part of the statutory Code of Ethics. And keeping in mind, even though it says teacher, it applies to all staff. We have obligations to the students, and let's go right to what the obligations are. Abide by all applicable federal and state laws. Seems pretty obvious. One of the federal laws that we'll talk about a little bit is FERPA. And the issues, especially again with social media and crossing over the lines with FERPA. Not unreasonably restraining the student from independent action or pursuit of learning. And then provide the student with professional education in a non-discriminatory manner. So regardless of the student's background, it doesn't matter. You provide the same services to every student. Respect the constitutional rights of the student. Again, this is right out of the state law. Not unreasonably deny student access to varying points of view. Not deliberately suppress or distort subject matter. Make reasonable effort to protect the student from conditions harmful to learning or to the health and safety. This is one that you'll see cited some, is where we failed to make reasonable effort to protect the student from harmful conditions. And this is one you'll see in some of our case studies that we'll see cited. Make reasonable effort to protect the emotional well-being of the student. Sometimes in some of the case studies, you'll see that you would think this would never happen, but it gets back to judgment. Sometimes in some of these case studies, you'll see the teacher has embarrassed the student.
Right.
And keep in mind, we're statutorily obligated to protect the emotional well-being of the student. So again, that you'd think that you shouldn't have to say that, but it happens.
But it's also a reminder for teachers to be aware of their classroom environment, particularly student-to-student relations and conversations.
Absolutely.
Needing to step in if the need arises.
And continuing on this, not intentionally exposing the student to embarrassment or disparagement. And again, some of our examples we're going to get to, you will not believe what bad mistakes, bad judgments some people have made when they disparage students publicly and embarrass the students. And you wouldn't think that you would need to say that, but you do. And of course, you do not base on any of the protected classes, race, color, nationality, sex, etc. You don't do any of these things. Exclude the student from participation in programs, deny benefits to the student, or grant any advantage to the student. So you don't treat one student better than you do any other student, regardless of their background, regardless of their race, color, religion, etc. You don't use the educator's professional relationship with the student for private advantage. And let me give you an example of this. I don't have a case study, but Christy Ballard, who is the attorney for the Department of Education, I watched one of her webinars on this very subject, and she used this as an example. She actually had two examples. You have a teacher who offers to tutor a student for pay after hours, and it's this teacher's student. And her example was, she said, you're paid to teach this student anyway.
Right.
So you can't use that professional relationship for private advantage. However, she made a distinction. She said, now, if it's someone that's not your student, then that's a different matter.
Removes a lot of the conflict.
That's right. And another example she used was coaches. Okay. If you have a player, I'm going to use baseball as an example. If you are offering batting lessons for a player that is currently on your team, Well, you should be teaching that player batting skills anyway. That doesn't mean that if you're offering this for some other players, for some other teams for pay, you could do that. But keep in mind, if you're using that relationship for private advantage, that can get you in trouble.
Be aware of conflicts.
That's right. Not disclose information about the student. This gets into the FERPA issue. And we'll see some examples where the teachers have shared information publicly on social media about students. Not knowingly make false or malicious statements about students
Or colleagues.
colleagues.
That's a big one.
And you know that, and we'll see some examples of that too. You can't, you don't go around and make false or malicious, mean-spirited comments about students or your fellow employees, your colleagues, which that is a violation of the Code of Ethics.
Judgment and discretion, again, being the buzzwords.
Communication and relationships. It's all about communication and relationships, using good judgment. Ensure interactions with the student take place in transparent and appropriate settings. Here's this I'll get to this a little bit more, but if you have private texting communication with students, that is not an interaction with the student that's in a transparent and appropriate setting. You know, so you just got to be careful. And going back to Christy Ballard, whenever she did her presentation, she used the example about texting students. She said, you wouldn't take a student to a broom closet, close the door, and have a communication with that student.
Right.
And basically, if you're texting a student privately, that's what you're doing. You're not having transparent communication. And I'll talk a little bit more about the proper texting of students, because it might have a place, but it's not in that one-on-one communication.
And a very, I guess, real thing to remember, if it would embarrass you to have that message on the billboard down Highway 45, it's not a conversation you need to be having.
That's absolutely true. And people let their guard down some,
right,
in texting. And I think people let their guard down some in social media posts. So you just got to be careful with this interaction with your students. Not engage in, which seems to be obvious, not engage in sexually related behavior with student. Okay. With or without the student's consent.
Right.
So, and then it defines what sexual behavior is, which, but it's a long list, and it's unfortunate that this does happen. Matter of fact, I was just reading last night about a story about a 26-year-old teacher who had a relationship with a 17-year-old student. And it started out very innocently, but it turned into something more. So you just got to be careful. Not furnish alcohol or illegal or unauthorized drugs to a student.
Shocking that you have to say that.
We'll see a case in Tennessee that dealt with this very issue. Shocking that you would have to say it, but you do. Strive to prevent the use of alcohol or illegal drugs by the student when the student's under your supervision on school premises, during school activities, or in any private setting. In any private setting. So, refrain from use of alcohol while on school property or during a school activity when students are present. Again, you would think that's obvious. Maintain a professional approach with students at all times. Now, this is one of those catch-alls that talks about basically relationships and communication. You've got to, and getting back to what you said, if you would be embarrassed to have it on a billboard, chances are that was not a professional approach with that student. So just be careful about professionalism in dealing with students. All right. Now, this is continued obligations of the teacher, and I'm going to just go through these. This is your obligation to the profession as a whole. You should not deliberately make false statements or fail to disclose a material fact relating to someone who's applying for a position, a professional position. Misrepresent your professional qualifications. Assist entry into the profession of someone that you know should not be in the profession. Disclose information about colleagues obtained in the course of professional service. Again, this is that whole relationship with your colleagues. If you shouldn't disclose information that you obtain about one of your colleagues that you obtained during your professional service in the district. So, knowingly make false or malicious statements about a colleague. Accept any gratuity that might impair or appear to influence your decisions, or use illegal drugs. All right. You shall administer state mandated assessments fairly and ethically. And I'll tell you, I was involved in a matter a few years ago where a teacher did not administer the test fairly and ethically, and that teacher was terminated and had license suspended for a period of time. Conduct yourself in a manner that preserves the dignity and integrity of the profession. Now, this is an interesting one because in my world, in the legal world, if I know a lawyer breaches our professional responsibility rules, I have an obligation to report that breach to the Board of Professional Responsibility.
Okay.
I did not know that in the same vein that educators have that same responsibility. If you know of an educator who has violated the code of ethics, you have an obligation, according to the state law, to report that to an immediate supervisor.
Yeah, Dr. King said very early on with the leadership, I love you, I'm going to support you, but I'm not going to jail for you. And I think he was pulling from this, the code when he said that.
We're going to see an example in Georgia where a superintendent basically covered up several violations of different teachers within his district, and the superintendent got in trouble over it. So I understand that because it comes back to this very issue. So if you fail to report that, then that is a breach of the teacher code of ethics, according to the state law. All right, let's go to the fun part, if you're ready to do that.
So these are examples, real life examples involving teachers and students, teachers and colleagues. Before we move on, we do want to remind folks, if you're wanting to see some of the documentation that was covered, much of this is in board policy. JMCSS.org. At the top, we have academics, we have communications. Well, there's also Office of Superintendent. And if you click on that button there, you'll have the option to look at board policy to dive into this more. Let's look at some of these case studies.
All right. Keep in mind, I'll tell you, I do a lot of presentations, usually in the employment arena, because that's my background some. But I used to try to come up with hypothetical examples. And what I've learned is that you can't make up hypotheticals any better than what's actually happened in real life. So I stopped doing hypothetical examples and just started using real life examples. So let's go to the first case study I have here.
So a teacher holds an after prom party at her cabin. Police raid the party on a tip that underage drinking was happening. Teacher said that she did not know there was alcohol being consumed. However, Dale, there was photographic evidence of half of a pickup load of alcohol. Keys had been taken up and a garbage can full of alcohol inside the cabin. This teacher pled guilty to contributing to delinquency of minors and allowing underage consumption of alcohol. So, face value, it kind of sounds nice. Oh, this teacher wants to have an activity for students, an after prom activity, but in this case, that went wrong.
Well, and that's exactly right. And I know sometimes we think, if it's off campus, after hours, I don't have to worry about code of ethics. And that's just simply not the case. And what we found here and what actually happened is that you'll see this actually, the teacher was terminated and the court affirmed a finding of unprofessional conduct and terminated the employee who was hosting underage drinkers. And so, again, you would think you don't have to say that, but here's a real life example in Tennessee, fairly recently, 2014. That so apparently you do have to say it.
Again,
And
judgment.
Absolutely judgment. Now, this teacher says she didn't know this was happening, but she took up keys. And there was all kinds of alcohol around. And of course, if you're taking up, why are you taking up keys?
Right. Because there's that possibility.
That's right. That's right. So case study number 2, another good set of facts.
All right. So here's case study number 2. Teacher was involved in a dispute with students that ended in physical altercations between him and at least one student. Witnesses said that he tried to provoke the student by hanging up the phone while the student was talking to his mother, stomping the student's bag of potato chips, and placing the student in a chokehold. This teacher had told the student not to bring snacks into his classroom on this particular day.
And, and I know that, teachers are confronted from time to time with physical altercations at school. And, and sometimes there's physical altercations between students, and also a student might be aggressive toward a teacher. And obviously you're going to have to defend yourself. But I think the key is for a teacher, the teacher's role is to try to de-escalate the situation and not escalate it.
Okay.
In this situation, I did a brief summary, but what happened was the teacher told the student not to bring snacks to his class.
Okay.
He brought snacks, took the snacks out of the student's hand, threw it on the floor, and started stomping the potato chips. And then the next thing you know, the student picks up the cell phone, calls a parent. Then, it just escalates into a physical altercation. And so this is just an example that you need to de-escalate the situation. Okay. And you just need to be careful with these physical altercations, which really do happen. And you need to, I understand you need to protect yourself, but you don't need to be the aggressor, and you need to try to de-escalate.
We can file this under poor classroom management.
That's absolutely true. And then here's what happened. The court, again, 2013, upheld the termination, said the teacher acted unprofessionally by aggravating rather than de-escalating the situation.
Case study number 3, Dale, takes us to the classroom.
All right.
Teacher approached a student in the presence of other students and touched his face to the student's face after declaring he loved his 6th period class. The student interpreted this as a kiss and felt uncomfortable going back to class after the incident.
All right. This is another one of those you chalk up to good judgment. And, and this is a 6th period. This is a 6th period class. And what I did not say in here, this was a middle school. This is a middle school incident. And so what happened here is the court, the teacher was suspended, and the court actually cited some provisions of the Code of Ethics, including the teacher shall make reasonable efforts to protect the student from conditions harmful to learning, and shall not intentionally expose the student to embarrassment or disparagement. So again, this teacher was suspended, and the charge of unprofessional conduct was upheld.
Again, this is something that happened in Tennessee.
That's right. This is a Tennessee case in 2010.
So our next case study.
This is a real interesting one.
For the record, Dale, this case really involves actions outside of the school.
That's absolutely right.
Okay, here we go. Case study number 4. Teacher's fiance and roommate were drug users and harboring a juvenile runaway. Teacher consented to a search of his home and drug paraphernalia was found. Teacher admitted to knowing they were crack cocaine drug users, but denied knowing that they did it at the home or seeing the drug paraphernalia. Teacher suspected the juvenile was a runaway, but allowed her to stay because he felt sorry for her.
That's right.
Poor judgment here.
Very poor judgment.
On many levels.
So the teacher was terminated, and keep in mind, none of this happened on school property.
Okay.
And now what's interesting is this juvenile runaway was not even a student in this school district. Okay.
So one might think that maybe the teacher maybe not having to report this, but certainly again, that's where good judgment has to come into play.
So what the court said is that this was conduct unbecoming a member of the teaching profession.
Yeah.
And said that there was significant question about this teacher's ability to teach and influence young people,
particularly with a home life like that.
And keep in mind, and I said there's a special relationship between teachers and students.
Public trust.
And if other students saw this and heard this, it's going to influence that teacher's ability to lead and teach the students in the classroom. So again, this was a Tennessee case from 2002.
So more examples. And again, as you said, Dale, even if you tried to make something like that up.
I could not make that one up.
Wow. So, here's another example. This is case study number 5.
Now this is a long history, but I thought it was real important to see. Now keep in mind, what you don't know right off the bat is this happened in the early, I think it was 1990s or maybe early 2000. I think it was 1990s. So it was really before it was 1990s because it was before social media. Now, while this was a letter that was sent out by the Spanish teacher, in today's world, it would likely have been a social media post.
Correct.
So if you might want to read what the letter said.
All right, here's case study 5. Teacher, a high school Spanish teacher, sent out a letter entitled "More Scandalous Conduct at Tennessee High School," which accuses the administration and colleagues of, quote, putting him down and, quote, going to great length to do so. The letter included accusations, refusing to recognize his achievements and those of his students, scheduling his class so that the bright students could not enroll, leaving him with the, quote, goof-offs, quote, very immature pupils, and, quote, a few mental defectives, lying to his students about the value of Latin in higher education in order to thwart his attempts to bring students into his classes, refusing to allow him to counsel out of his class the poor students, scheming to take credit from his students' success in Spanish competitions, and lying about students' results in language contests.
So basically, this teacher is very disgruntled.
Correct.
Because this teacher is a Spanish teacher, and apparently, according to the teacher, he felt like administration was giving preferential treatment to those in the Latin classes. And so he really, make some accusations toward administration and his colleagues that are unprofessional in nature. And then he talks about his students.
That's where he really messed up.
He talked, it causes students goof offs,
Right.
immature, et cetera, et cetera. So here's what happened in this case. Again, keep in mind, this was a letter. This happened in 1994. This is a letter. Today's world, it would have been a social media post.
Yep.
That's right. So the court said termination was upheld and said that there was little imagination required for the conclusion that the plaintiff, that would have been the teacher, ill-conceived and aggressive actions and statements were intolerably disruptive of the school system and were markedly unprofessional. Keep in mind, it was disruptive of the school system.
Mm-hmm.
So this disrupted the entire, the environment of the school system, of that particular school.
So Dale, it's not hard to imagine there may be a teacher at a school system who feels like they've been done wrong. So as a teaching lesson, what would be, well, there are a lot of things that would have been more productive than writing that letter. But what platforms are in place for a teacher to share this grievance?
Well, there's several, we have policies on grievance.
Mm-hmm.
We have a grievance procedure.
Mm-hmm.
So, if after you talk to your supervisor about it and you didn't feel like you got satisfaction or a satisfactory response,
Mm-hmm.
then there is a grievance procedure for you to file. And it's, if you'll go to jmcss.org,
Mm-hmm.
The way I do it is I always search for policy,
Okay.
and it
In the
comes
search
up
bar
board
there.
policy.
Mhm.
I use the search bar. And if you do that, you can come up and you'll see the grievance procedures, and that's how you do it.
Rather than
this way.
and disparaging students in the process.
Disparaged students, disparaged his colleagues,
Mm.
disparaged administration. The court also said that the teacher was terminated for a lot of statements, including his references to his students,
Mhm.
and also his references to his fellow teachers and administrators as liars and incompetents, and said that it was clearly unprofessional conduct.
Case study number 6. Okay.
This is there are 3 incidents involving this SPED teacher.
Okay.
The first is the teacher was wrestling a student over a planner book. The student took the teacher's planner book, and before you know it, they were both on the floor wrestling over that planner. Second, the teacher then went into another teacher's classroom and disrupted that teacher's class, expressing displeasure about some student schedules and the administration's decision. So the second incident was the disruption in the classroom,
Mm-hmm.
and also disparaging administration in the presence of these students and the other teacher. The third incident was a teacher used a restraint on a special needs student, which wasn't approved by the IEP.
And it wasn't the type of restraint that was done for the benefit
That's right.
of the student.
So there are 3 different incidents. One, the teacher did not de-escalate a situation.
Mhm.
Second, the teacher disrupted class, disrupted the environment, the teaching environment, a lot like the prior example we just saw. And then the third, the improper use of restraints on a special needs student. So basically what the court said was that there was violations of the Code of Ethics, and cites particular provisions of the Code of Ethics, including the teacher failed to strive to earn the respect and confidence of the colleagues. So termination was upheld for unprofessional conduct, a 2018 case out of Franklin Special School District.
Again, in Tennessee. So the next case studies that we'll go through or mention have been shared with principals, and if teachers are interested just in reading over some of the stuff, we can certainly share it in the teachers lounge.
Well,
Dale, can you read that headline there?
Here, this is a teacher has violated ethical standards in exchange with student parent on social media.
I remember this one. This was the case where the history teacher on his own Facebook page made comments about this was during the time, I guess, the Confederate flag was coming down from South Carolina, and this teacher in Georgia made comments about the Georgia flag. A student commented on the teacher's Facebook page. So the teacher had a back and forth with the student, then also had a back and forth with the student's mother publicly on Facebook page. And in this back and forth, the teacher essentially said, well, if you don't want I'm paraphrasing, if you don't want your son being my student, you can request someone else. And so he essentially, in addition to the back and forth on social media, made some comments that were essentially not true in terms of board policy and the process of students being selected
for classes. That's right. And then he also made comments about the student that was in the back and forth with him, that his friends were ignorant.
He did say that.
And so there's a lot of back and forth. And again, this gets to the relationships, the communication, poor judgment, and those type of things. And basically what happened was this teacher was terminated, and there were several things that were mentioned in the termination in violation of ethical standards. The maintenance of just and professional relationships with students and parents, because the parent was also involved. Restraint for using school contacts to promote political views. Protecting the emotional well-being of the students, because he called students ignorant. And maintaining professional approach with the students. This is a good example of just being aware of social media.
Yeah.
And so there are other examples in this. This is off of this was an article, but there are other
Georgia,
examples,
I believe that,
of social media issues that I just marked down a few other examples. Okay. There was another teacher in South Carolina that was put on administrative leave because he posted a lot of offensive comments about the Black Lives Matter movement. In New York, an assistant principal was reported to the Department of Education for posting racist memes about the privilege of being on public assistance. In San Diego, a teacher was terminated for unprofessional conduct for posting nude pics. Now, keep in mind, it wasn't a nude pic with a student or anything like that. It was just a nude pic of herself that she posted on her own private social media post. Again, the thought was, and what the district said was that it affected the teacher's ability to teach because it affected her ability to serve as a role model. So those are just other examples of social media issues you just got to be aware of, and you got to be careful with social media.
Dale, as you think about, again, and we'll look at just a few more of those headlines that I thought were interesting. As you think about this, going back to the teacher from Georgia, he made the post on his Facebook page, which, whether or not you want to say that was wise or not, I mean, that could be argued. But that teacher did not have to respond to the student statement.
Absolutely.
He did not have to respond to the mother statement. He could have it was his own Facebook page, so he could have deleted the student's comment. He could have deleted the mom's comment, or not made the post altogether. But even after the post was made, the teacher still had options.
Right. That's right. If this teacher had made the post and left it at that, this teacher probably would not have been terminated.
Right.
And but what happened was he got into that exchange. And again, it's a situation where he didn't de-escalate the communication and the relationship. He actually took it to the next level.
Going through, was it some on here that you wanted to mention?
Well, it depends. I don't know where we
that's
are.
fine. I do want to mention the case study 8. Something, and I guess, Dale, I was spoiled a little bit in terms of students and social media because I taught a broadcasting class. So it was actually in the standards for the students I had to participate in media, to whether it's traditional or social. But now, I mean, as the years have passed, teachers are using social media, even in positive ways, to promote a curriculum, to promote an activity. But that case study that was mentioned there in Wired, and it had several examples, and it was really just talking about whether or not teachers had done the work to make sure students had the clearance to be identified in some of these pieces of media.
And that's where you get into some FERPA issues, because One of them was the teacher. It was a very cute exchange. A first grader was having a difficult time answering a question in class, and as first graders can be, it was a very cute exchange. And the teacher videoed it and then uploaded it, and actually got 17 million views on TikTok. But the problem is the teacher didn't have any permission to use that student's picture or the likeness at all. There's several other examples, and like one teacher used as a defense, I won't go through all of them, but one teacher used as a defense that she asked the student if he was okay with her posting,
as if he had the as legal
that's right, as though the student could make that decision, you know, and you can't do that. It's not the student's call.
Dale, if you would flip through some of those. So we talked about the TikTok. Let's see, conduct of ethics restricts social media interactions between teachers and students. That was down in Mississippi.
Let me go through. There's a couple of others. There is one that I thought was interesting in case study 9. I'm going to go back to that. In Mississippi, they actually made some rules on social media in their code of ethics that I think you might start seeing go farther than just Mississippi. And I thought this was interesting. The Mississippi lawyer who is with the School Board Association made this statement: social media and texting have the same issues. The one-on-one texting is inappropriate. If a coach needs to text a player, you need to text that player and another coach, or text all team members.
Say that again, Dale.
All right. If a coach needs to text a player, you need to text that player and another coach, because that way it's not a private communication.
Okay.
Or you text the entire team, because again, it's not that private communication.
Right. And so then on the front end, when you're developing this text chain, educating whether it's a club activity or sport, educating your students on the importance of proper conduct in these communications.
That's correct. So if we got, I don't know if we got time for a few more, but there are a couple others. I was going to go to ahead. Number 11, which I thought was this is the one I alluded to earlier, where a superintendent got in trouble. This is in Georgia. A lot of these examples came out of Georgia. I don't know what's going on in Georgia, but in 2019, the Department of Education investigated the district because the superintendent there failed to report 15 ethical violations of teachers. And I thought it was, and the superintendent got in trouble. Getting back to what Dr. King said, he wasn't going to jail.
I love you, but I'm not going to jail for you. He said that several times.
But there were several examples here I thought was really interesting. One teacher stole a student's violin. Another, a SPED assistant, was involved in an incident where an autistic child's arm was broken. A teacher's aide pushed down a 10-year-old to the ground after being previously arrested for firing warning shots into a group of teenage boys.
Wow.
A PE teacher left a student outside in the rain after the student had been unruly in the class. So that was the PE teacher's punishment of that child. A pre-K teacher was accused of tying up students with pipe cleaners as a form of punishment.
Wow.
And then, so just keep in mind, we talked about the Tennessee Code actually puts an obligation on us to report these type of violations. So if you see that, you have an obligation to do that. And if you don't do that, that is in and of itself a violation of the code. I was going to see if there's another. I thought there's several that are really good. I didn't know.
While you're looking through that, just a reminder that if you're interested in just learning more about ethics, whether it's specific to the Jackson-Madison County school system or the state of Tennessee, we do invite you to visit jmcss.org. One of the buttons there at the top, Office of Superintendent, of course, along with the board meeting schedule. There's also information about board policy.
Okay, just a couple more. There's a teacher in Wisconsin, a first grade teacher, had her class ready to perform the song Rainbow Land, which I don't know what that is, but I
Well, Dale,
understand
I'm pretty
it's
hip, but I don't
it's
know what that is either.
well, it's apparently a song by Dolly Parton
Okay.
and Miley Cyrus, and and apparently it describes a utopia where we're free to be exactly who we are.
Okay.
And the administration felt like that was violated their controversial issue policy. So they told the first grade teacher, you cannot perform that.
Okay.
So the teacher then decides to get to social media using Twitter, and she tweets out this comment: my first graders were so excited to sing Rainbow Land for the spring concert, but it has been vetoed by our administration. When will it end? She was terminated for expressing her discontent with administrators' decision in an inappropriate and disruptive way.
So the problem wasn't she had an opinion.
That's right.
That's not the problem. Highlight the problem, Dave.
Well, the problem is the way that she went about communicating that issue.
Okay.
And and she did it through social media, and apparently, when you read the article, it got national attention, and the administration got inundated by she got a lot of entertainers involved and got inundated, and it became a disruption to the school system, and that's why she was terminated. It sort of reminds me of that case with the Spanish teacher,
right?
That the comments were unprofessional, yes, but it got worse because it became disruptive of the school system. And the last example I was going to talk about, you're talking about close to home and real recent.
Oh, okay, that's just up north a little bit.
These are in July,
and south.
2 different incidents in July. The Tennessee State Comptroller's Office has a new division led by Mike Donovan, who used to be an U.S. attorney, where they're really looking at any type of misappropriation of public funds. And in July of 2013, a middle school teacher in Savannah was indicted for theft and misconduct when she allegedly stole $370 in student supply and locker rental fees paid by her homeroom students. She resigned in June, and then she was indicted in July. $370. So in July of 2023, the early learning coordinator for the Parish Special School District allegedly stole over $7,000 from the elementary school PTO. She used district-issued credit card to make personal purchases, and then she stole collection envelopes from the office from the sales of lunches during the Paris fish fry. So both of these are instances of misappropriation of the school property and school money that ultimately led to their discharge. So, these are just some examples of and again, Greg, it gets back to the whole issue that we started out with, and that is using good judgment, proper communication, and proper relationships between and among colleagues, students, and parents.
We do want to encourage teachers and employees. You can make yourself familiar with district policy by visiting our website, jmcss.org. You can click on Office of the Superintendent. Along with the board meeting schedules, you'll be able to see a board policy, or as our own attorney says, you can just go to the search bar and search policies, several of them there. We do want to thank Attorney Dale Thomas for joining us again. He's been with JMCSS for nearly 3 decades. So in terms of institutional knowledge, he does have that. If you're unfamiliar with the studio that we are in, it is the studio we use for the JMCSS podcast for the district, which is filmed at Forever Communications, and the show airs Sunday mornings at 11:30 on JJ 97.7 FM. You can also check out the JMCSS podcast on Spotify. So again, we want to thank Attorney Thomas. Again, the buzzwords for today: judgment, and judgment.
That's correct.
And a pinch of discretion for good measure.
And communication, proper communication.
We will make this live stream, this recording available to any employees who were not able to attend this session. We hope you have enjoyed this segment with Attorney Thomas, and we hope you have a great week.